Hi, welcome back to another TerranScapes video. Today I have a product review, and it's something that I've been interested in trying out for quite some time now, and I actually purchased many months back, and it's been sitting on the shelf because I didn't really just have the tinkering time to work with it. And basically, before I keep it too mysterious, I finally got a chance to try out a molding compound, and the product is called Composimold. And basically what this is it's a sort of like a very stiff gel that you microwave to produce sort of a honey type consistency that you can do pour molds with. And once the material cools, you can then cast into it, and then once you're done casting into it, however many times you want, you can take the mold, pop it back in the container, reheat it, remelt it, and use it again. That's the claim and the product's main advantage. The Composimold comes in two varieties. There's the normal Composimold, and then there's Composimold Power Mold. And the Power Mold, and I'll show you a close-up of this in just a second. The Power Mold is supposed to be stiffer and stronger. It's supposed to have improved tear-resistant properties, etc. And I really wanted to try out the Power Mold since tearing is an issue, I figured, with this kind of a molding compound, and so I wanted to try to get the best effect out of it I could. It comes in a variety of sizes. This is the largest container. This is 32 ounces, and I can't remember exactly, but I think this retailed for about $40. Now, that's pretty cheap, assuming that you can reuse it. Now, I've been taking a look at their videos online for quite a while, and I've been mentioning Composimold to a variety of people, and when I do terrain tips on the podcast painting table, but I hadn't actually used it before. And I'm not going to actually go through a whole pour right now, melting it down, as Composimold has done several videos showing how that's done. They have well, before I get sidetracked here, if you're interested in seeing it in use, you should just search on YouTube for Composimold, and you'll find a variety of videos that they've been putting up, anywhere from candy making to toy replicating, army men figures, a whole variety of things. So, why did I finally go to use this? I wanted to work on, as you probably, if you've been following the channel, you know that castle project I recently completed had a variety of pieces that needed to be molded. I needed to produce a lot of those pieces in a relatively short time frame, and I felt like I could expand my production by using Composimold to produce some additional molds with it and get really a good test of whether this is going to be something that's going to be useful to me. What I'd like to do is show you what I tried to mold, show you the results, and talk about what I think about Composimold in general. So just before getting into the application, just to show you up close, so basically, they have simple directions, right? Heat, make, reuse. You heat it up in the microwave to what they recommend here, which is 200 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, I don't have a thermometer, candy thermometer, that I wanted to sacrifice to this, so I had no way of monitoring the temperature. And so I basically heated it to about as hot as I could hold this canister. So I may have exceeded the temperature, but I found I wanted to get as thin a consistency as I could from the material during the heating. On the top, they have some recommendations for the heat time: 30 seconds for 6 ounces, 32 ounces, 7 to 10 minutes. Stir it every minute. You do have to stir it regularly, as you know, microwaves don't heat evenly. And then they have some basic directions about how to use the product. Let's open this up here, give you a sense of what it looks like inside. So the Composimold is, it looks kind of like amber, solidified tree sap. It has a sort of a similar consistency. It does have some give, and it feels almost a little tacky to the touch, a little sticky. When it is poured, the material is pretty flexible, but you can see it's soft and it's yielding, and it does kind of return to its original shape, but it's kind of like almost like a heavy dough. So, basically, now I've tried Composimold in a couple small experiments before now. And time and time again, the issue that I've had is with bubbles. in it. And you can see, of course, in the top here, there are many entrapped bubbles in the material, from the mixing process and the heating process. And those have been a chronic problem for my small experiments that I've used this on the past. For this example, what I did is these are the masters that I used for the spikes on the castle turrets and walls. And so these spikes, I thought would be an excellent opportunity to do some mass replication, as I needed a lot of these and a few other of the small parts. So I actually used as you can tell from its shape, because I learned this. When I make a standard box for my mold making, what I use is plexiglass, and I hot glue that down to the flat surface to pour. The hot glue can't handle the Composimold because it's 200 degrees plus, and it melts the hot glue. And the first time I tried that, my whole mold box fell apart. So, luckily it cools down relatively quickly, and it wasn't a complete disaster. And of course, you could just scrape up all the bits, throw them back in the container, reheat that, and off you go. So, but during those experiments, I had a lot of bubble problems. Now, what I'd like to do is show you the result. Here you can see this was the piece that goes here. This is the thin strip that goes here, and there were a couple other of the components that I added to the mold. I used a metal small loaf tin. I don't know what metal it was, aluminum, something like that. And when I poured this in, basically you can see here I used I think a screwdriver to wedge out one of the corners to lift it up, peel it out of that, because I couldn't break open my mold box as it was my loaf tin. And once again, I ended up with a massive bubble problem. Before I show the bubbles, I just want to say that they recommend as a release agent, not as I should say as a bubble reduction agent, whatever, because they are aware that bubbles can be a problem, to paint your materials with watered down PVA glue and let that dry. I have tried that in the past, and I found that the watered down PVA glue tends to not stick to these smooth surfaces, and it pulls away through surface tension and leaves gaps anyway, and when I tried that, I got bubbles in it. So for this one, I just sprayed it with my silicone release agent, and the silicone release agent I figured is going to, give as good, at least it's going to give a uniform surface, and it's going to be relatively non-stick, so perhaps that would help alleviate bubbling. And I'll show you a close-up here, and look at the result. Unbelievable amount of bubbles in the surface. And this was really, I think, the last straw for me making an attempt with Composimold, and I'll talk a little bit more about what I've done afterwards. But as a final thought on this, let's see if I just zoom in real quick here so you can get a really good, will that focus? You gonna focus? Come on, you're supposed to do 2 inches. Well, I think you get the sense from that. Look at those bubbles. Look at that. And actually, now, one of the things is, because this is transparent, notice, so I could actually see the bubbles when I poured this. I knew that there were bubbles along all of the surfaces. So what I did is I took a soft brush while it was still liquid, and I went in and tried to brush off the bubbles from all of the surfaces, and that did nothing. It would drag across, and it would push some of the bubbles over and drag other bubbles right back onto the surface. And the bubbles seem to have a tenacity to cling to the surface of the material. It's kind of crazy, actually. I mean, it really, you can see them in profile here. See them sticking out from all of the surfaces. And of course, there are many bubbles entrapped in the material that were rising to the top and never quite get there because of its cool down period. But overall, it's obviously it's a completely unusable mold. So before my final thoughts, I kind of want to add that, so I did try using the watered down PVA glue suggestion, and I've even tried vacuum degassing the mold, which also was disastrous, and I should have thought about it beforehand. But if you know any of your basic science involving pressures and boiling points, as you reduce the pressure over a liquid, its boiling point drops. So as I began to vacuum degas the Composimold, it actually erupted into a boiling froth because it was so hot in the vacuum chamber, and then immediately cooled down because the boiling, right, you're basically evacuating all of the hot molecules, all of the heat energy is leaving in the gas form, and then what you have remaining behind is a complete mess. It was a disaster. And it seemed to be giving off water vapor as the entire chamber filled up with steam, and when I was worried that I was going to have to clean that off of all the surfaces, and actually it just seemed to be water vapor. So I'm not sure what the actual composition of the Composimold is and whether that had changed its properties at all, but I tried it out of an act of desperation, basically thinking, you know, how else am I going to get the bubbles off of the surface of the materials that I'm trying to do? They also recommend painting it on to eliminate bubbles and then pouring, but you're going to have to, you know, if you let the painted on bit cure, it's going to be reliquefied when the hot Composimold goes into it. And I felt like even by painting it on, it was very difficult to get a bubble-free surface. In fact, I had a friend over who had made a small component that he wanted to use on a conversion, and we tried painting it onto that, and there were bubbles trapped in that as well. So my general overall opinion of Composimold is extremely low. I feel like it makes a lot of claims that it's unable to produce, except for the most basic, you know, kind of child's toy replication by kids kind of use. It doesn't have any real application for anybody who needs any kind of quality control in their rubbers, in their molds. Saying that, I will point out one interesting observation. My wife actually noticed this first, is that in the mold block, when I poured it, along the actual surface where it was contacting the metal of the container, it's actually relatively bubble free. And I have no real explanation for that. I don't understand why, as I sprayed, you know, the release agent into everything. Maybe it has to do with it being metal. Maybe it has to do with being a loaf pan and having previously been cooked in. I guess I haven't tried like vegetable oil as an anti-bubble agent. Perhaps there were vegetable oils residues on it that haven't been thoroughly, you know, cleaned off or carbonized onto the metal. That's affecting it. But saying that, and actually I should have shown this when we were under the close cam, but let's see if you can see it. Underneath, or in the actual lettering of the pan itself, there were a few small bubbles present. They're not many, but if you're looking for, you know, some kind of a real, you know, decent replication, especially if, you know, you're using your master and you're trying to reproduce something, maybe for another mold, right? I'm going to make 20 of these and then I can set them up and pour a platinum silicone rubber mold from that. Cleaning all those defects out is going to be a real nightmare and possibly impossible depending on where the bubbles appear. So I feel like really this has no real application to the serious mold maker, and you know, perhaps could best be reserved for candy making for a holiday or something like that. I did check online and I went to a couple forums. I realized that I should probably see what the community is thinking about this. Maybe they've got a solution that I'm not aware of. And I went to two sites. One I went to was the HerStarts forum. I actually just searched Composimold forum for my search query. And I ended up at the HerStarts site. And you know, HerStarts site is filled with mold makers because they want to make custom blocks to match up with Bruce Earth's molds. They want to replicate blocks so that they can do mold making or casting more quickly, yada yada. And the site basically said that whenever they've tried to cast plaster into the Composimold, the water would react with the surface of the Composimold and it would soften it so that you would get a deformed mold, because some of the Composimold would actually get pucked out and retain, you know, stuck on the plaster blocks themselves once they finally hardened. Then I went to a professional prop makers forum. These are people who make movie props. They do a lot of casting to make lightweight replicas of more dangerous elements, you know, hammers, guns, whatnot. And their main complaint was twofold. One, they could not eliminate the bubbles in the surface, and there was a great series of photos of somebody trying to replicate a police officer's badge and the difficulties he had with it. And they also mentioned that when you try to pour resin into it, unless you use some kind of a very low temperature resin, once the resin begins to cure, it's exothermic, it gives off heat, and that will actually soften the Composimold and cause it to degrade, and you lose your mold. Composimold does have a recommendation for casting resins into their product, which is to place the mold in a freezer prior to casting into it so that you can keep that temperature low during the cure time. That's also obviously going to slow down the resin's cure rate as well, so that's something to consider. But I haven't tried that, so I can't attest to its results. But I wanted to post this video anyway, just to give you, a little warning that and maybe a query as well. Maybe somebody out there has been using this product and they know a trick to get the bubbles out of it. If I could have the bubbles 99.9% eliminated, then I think this would be really nice to be able to use for some custom molds that you don't want to retain all the time. You don't want to spend the expensive silicone on it. You just want to do a quick couple casts. It would be an ideal product for that, but in my personal opinion at this stage, it's completely unusable. So, sorry it's not a good review, but I feel like sometimes you got to point out some of the things to stay away from as well. If you have any knowledge about how to work with this better than I do, please let me know. But otherwise, I would stick to Instamold, which I believe is the press-on putty. By the way, you can find that in generic forms. They sell it in Japan as like a child's toy, so they can make their own little molds and shapes and stuff. They're like colored sticks. I think Girl Painting has done a video on that as well. You might check out there. But anyway, I would stick with that, which seems to have better bubble control, and I may look at that in the future for some quick mold making on small pieces. But feels like trying to press a putty onto something like this wasn't going to work anyway, so I feel like in the end I just went with a silicone mold and went from there. Well, this went on a little longer than I thought, but it's kind of nice to chat with you. Hopefully you found it interesting, and feel free to leave comments and questions down below, and keep your eye on the channel because I actually have another video on the new release coming out very soon.